Athletes, take your mark, get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blu here. Thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. We appreciate you doing so. You sharing this podcast to those who might need a little assistance with some addiction recovery, maybe some mental health resources. That is what you can do to help Team Addict to Athlete and our movement. Jump onto our website, addicttoathlete.org. We got tons of free downloads, our podcast, free stuff for you guys to learn more about addiction and mental health, and more so to become part of the team. While you're on there, check out all of our resources tabs. They are pretty easy to navigate. Marissa, our athletic director, has made that possible for you. So jump on, scope around, and please get the conversation going. I want to thank all of our Patreon subscribers. Thank you guys so much. I hope you're enjoying the Extracurricular Recovery Playbook. We're downloading 2 to 3 episodes of that a week, so I hope you guys are enjoying that. Athletes, today I'm excited. We've got an amazing man who has done some amazing things and overcome some pretty interesting adversities, literally, to turn his mess of addiction into the message of sobriety. And he's done it kind of just because of a purpose. And I love some of the things that we're going to look forward to talking about today. Today we've got Tony Hoffman. He's here to talk a little bit about not just metaphoric change, but literally coming from the lowest of lows, which I think, Tony, was a prison stint, all the way to the Rio Olympics. And I can't wait to hear more of that story. Tony, welcome to the Addict to Athlete podcast, brother. Tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and let's just get this conversation started.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I guess my title today is a former BMX professional, a 2016 Rio Olympic Games coach, and currently a professional speaker on mental health and addiction. I'm originally from Central California. I'm now stationed in Dallas, where I'll be spending the foreseeable future. So yeah, I grew up in California and came out here about a year ago.
That is awesome. So doing a little bit of deep diving into the BMX scene, I'm so curious, man. Like, tell me a little bit about your childhood. I'd love to know. Every little boy, myself included, man, when you got that bike, it was absolute freedom. And I remember that growing up in my house where I had, drug addiction through my parents and things of that nature. My bike was my ticket to like explore, to be free. Man, my kids, their bikes got dust on them, and I just cry when I go out there and look at them, man. But, I noticed we're about the same age and whatnot, but tell me a little bit about your introduction into BMX, because this is something that I think after watching movies like, like E.T. with the cut scene when they're all BMXing, they jump over the cop cars and they fly, right? All the way to that movie that I know you must have loved, Rad, right, in the 80s. We fell in love with BMX, but it is one of those sports that kind of like ebbed and flowed. Like, how in the world did you get yourself invested and involved in that?
So, yeah, good question. Actually, so the bike for me wasn't stepping on a bicycle wasn't my first taste of freedom. Putting a round ball inside a hoop was actually my first taste of freedom. And I pretended that my toy box was a basketball hoop. And so my first dream was actually to be like Michael Jordan. Yeah. I came home from elementary school every day and I watched Come Fly With Me. And I wanted to be like Michael Jordan. And so my first dream was actually to go to the NBA. I found a bicycle at 12 years old. Obviously, I had a bicycle that I rode and kicked around the neighborhood with my brother and other neighbor kids and jumped off curbs and stuff. But it was never something that I really dreamed about. I found it as a result of getting kicked out of 7th grade for selling weed to a girl. I got caught, and my brother was racing BMX already at this time with one of his high school buddies, middle school buddies. High school buddies at this time. And he was always out at the BMX track, and my mom and dad were supporting his racing. And so they were out at the BMX track where I was more or less riding a skateboard, playing basketball, or riding aggressive inline skates by myself or with some people that I was hanging out with. Right. So my parents stopped me from doing all of that and said, you need to come out to the BMX track. Right. And so I went out to the BMX track. And that was when I was introduced to the BMX bike, and it was merely a challenge by my dad. He was just like, the kids that are racing on the track right now, those are kids that you would race. Why don't you give racing a shot? And I decided, you know what, I'll do it. What else is there to do? So I started racing BMX. Now, rewinding, my dad was a professional motocross racer.
Right.
And, he's raced at Daytona. He was sponsored by Yamaha on street bikes. He raced flat track and did motocross, taught Ricky Johnson, 5-time Supercross champion, how to ride a motorcycle, friends with Brock Glover, the whole San Diego, California crew. My dad has deep roots in racing. And so he had a buddy, Pat Evans, that was like one of his best friends, pass away in a street bike accident. racing. And I think as a result of that, he didn't want me and my brother riding motorcycles.
Yeah.
He was scared of that. And so what's the next thing?
Yeah. The
bike.
The BMX, right? The bicycle motocross. Absolutely.
So my brother was always into motocross and stuff like that. And he's also done downhill mountain biking and things. So he got involved in it as kind of, follow dad's footsteps, but on a micro scale. And so when we went out, I started going out to the BMX track. That's how I got involved in it. And it was, I really didn't know how much I loved BMX until I got out of prison. I just did it because I was good at it.
Right.
Starting at 12 years old.
But that's the thing. But that's the thing. Getting kicked out because, and I've seen some of your videos, and listeners, we're going to attach a lot of this stuff on Tony to this podcast. You guys can check out. He's got a very deep basket full of amazing talks and things. But I did catch one of those where it said that, because you kind of had this middle finger to some authority and you were just wanting to be one of those kids that just could, have relationships and build more, that when that opportunity came for you to kind of step up and to challenge yourself with finding weed for someone, you did, and she got busted, which meant you got busted. Was that the first kind of stint you had with substance use? Was that the first time you'd kind of been around it and saw some of the cause and effect, or was there anything before that?
Nothing before that. I mean, cigarettes. I think I tried my first cigarette when I was in 4th grade. I think the writing was on the wall that I was struggling internally. At that time, obviously, when I'm 4th grade, I don't understand what my struggle is.
Right.
Even when I'm stepping up and trying to seek validation from institutional peers at school, I don't understand the mechanics yet. I'm just trying to be accepted at that time, and I don't realize that I'm trying to be accepted by my peers or have some form of validation. But that was my first introduction to any kind of substance that's mind altering. But I didn't use at that point. Using for me was actually my behavior. Coping mechanisms at that point were some type of behavior. Was it either bullying, trying to do what I could to be accepted or be cool, a class clown inside the classroom. My first coping skill for the struggles that I was having internally were my behavior.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
so was that on the radar of like teachers and stuff too? And they were like, "Hey, man, you're the parents to Tony here. We got to talk to you." Like, was that even on the radar? Or was it like, well, he's just that kid that's outgoing, give him the attention, and then we'll move on? But only it fed the ego.
I think it was more. My parents had conversations with a lot of teachers and principals, right? And it was always, he's a smart kid, but he acts out. And at that time, though, we're talking about early 90s, mid 90s, and there's no real conversations around.
There wasn't.
Why individuals are acting out or why individuals are drinking or smoking weed at early ages. It was typically attached to some kind of stigma or, bad kid.
Gotcha.
X, Y, and Z equals bad kid. Bad kid, we got to get them out of here so they don't disrupt the order of the day, so to speak. And so there was no heavy conversations. I mean, the signs were kind of on the wall. My parents, tried to do the best that they could with the skills that they had as parents. But for me, it wasn't quite enough. I was really struggling with a lot of depression and anxiety. And my parents worked all the time. They're workaholics.
Gotcha.
So I didn't have their comfort and care.
Gotcha. So that's kind of the precursor to a lot of this. It's kind of interesting. I've been doing this for 20 years. I work with a lot of folks, and I say there's always a cause, and sometimes it's more obvious, sometimes it's less obvious. But with parents that are unified and married, there's still some stewardship in there. You didn't quite have some of that structure, but you made the best of it. After you got kind of booted for connecting the weed there, and you got into BMXing, how far did that take you before you literally got off the bike again? Like, what did BMX do for you in that the teenage life?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that a human being needs two forms of two outlets that will kind of stabilize mental health. One's a safe place for a conversation. The second one is a way to connect with other individuals, whether they're like-minded or something through some kind of hobby or activity, right? And so BMX gave me one of those things. It was a place to compete, be physically active, and connect with other individuals and feel welcomed, right? And so that carried me into my senior year of high school. That's when I was on the cover of the BMXer magazine, which at the time was the largest BMX racing magazine in the world. It was sponsored by Fox Racing, Airwalk Shoes, Spy Sunglasses. I really was building a successful resume as a racer. But again, I did it because I was good at it. I didn't necessarily love it the way I do or did when I got out of prison and came back to the sport, because I still struggled so much with my mental health.
Yeah.
I didn't have that place to have the safe place to have a conversation that could help me navigate what I was feeling, right? I kept all those feelings for all those years that I was on the bike. I kept them to myself. And when we keep feelings to ourselves, the only resolution that we can come up with is our best thinking at that time. And so despite being successful in BMX, I was still on a downward spiral when we talk about the internal process of what I was experiencing.
Did anyone really notice? Because as you're climbing up some of that professional ladder, and as you're kind of getting better and stronger with riding, on the surface, being sponsored, it makes it look like on the outside looking in that you've got it made. What could you possibly have a problem with? Did people notice, or did that kind of help cover up the fact that, man, he must be doing good? Look, and no one asked the questions. How you doing? You doing okay?
I don't think we had those questions anyway back then.
Mm-hmm.
There was no welfare checks back then. There was no mental health check-ins. There was no, Tony's a little withdrawn lately. Maybe I should check on him. Maybe I should give him a call and ask him how he's doing, right? Sorry, that's my dog.
You're fine. No worries.
So it was really just people thought that I was fine because I had everything on the exterior, and I present myself very stout, strong in nature. And so you wouldn't necessarily notice that, I don't think, because I carry myself well, I think, and I've always been into fashion and shoes. And so I'm always maybe dressed nice. And that's, people judge exteriors without recognizing that you can have a very well put together exterior and a very destructive, demolished interior. And so that was my condition at 18 years old. I was actually in the worst place I'd ever been concerning my depression. My suicidal thoughts were at an all-time high. I'd never been more confused and discontent and feeling like I just didn't understand what the purpose of life was. I mean, the list goes on and on. The conversations that I was having with myself were never leading me to a place of empowerment at that time.
So I'm curious, how do you switch that stuff off when you're there on your bike? And I love the metaphor that you put in one of the videos that I watched about you, specifically about when your helmet was on, it was game on. When you took that off, it was like, man, reality kicks you back in the face. When you're there with the bike leaned up against the starting line, and you're just getting ready to go. I mean, how do you push all that away? How do you go from this kind of heavy-hearted individual to I've got a job to do now? For that 3 to 5 minutes that you're just cruising and sailing on that course, did it feel free or did it feel like a burden? Like towards the end, how did it feel, man? Like you're rising up, you're doing these things, and you're stronger, you're bigger, you're faster than the guys next to you. But like, do you feel like you were kind of an imposter? What'd you feel like?
I don't think I felt like I was an imposter. I felt towards the end, I think it felt more meaningless than purposeful.
Gotcha.
I definitely knew that I was there because I was great and knew to some degree that I was great. I'm a competitive person by nature.
Right.
So, in a clinical arena, you will see a lot of clinicians try and make sure that an individual understands their personal makeup so that they don't overexert themselves in a competitive field that may not suit their personal way of doing things, right? Yeah. Because it can be counterproductive. But in for my life, ever since I was a young kid, life has been competition. And so whatever it is that I'm doing, I find a way to make it competition. I've had to find middle ground because not everything is competition, right? But I don't like losing, bro.
For sure. That's a common theme I've heard. Yeah.
So when I get in the gate, I don't like losing, and I'm not going to get in the gate to lose.
Right.
I really could care less about winning. I just don't want to lose. I don't want to face the musical notes that equal I didn't train hard enough, or that I didn't practice enough, or that there's somebody better than me, and they're better than me not because they're actually better than me, because they're outworking me in some way. And I think that losing does that. It puts a mirror in front of us and exposes some things about ourselves. And if you're an individual like me, you don't like losing. The issue I had back then was that when I lost, I would shame myself, or I would have some kind of guilt mechanism that came with losing, instead of seeing the mirror and saying, okay, this is what I need to do differently so I can win. So there was no imposter syndrome. I just merely didn't like to lose.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm just doing it because this is what I do.
Yeah.
This is what my brother does. This is what my mom and dad are a part of. I don't actually see what gift I have at this time.
It makes a ton of sense.
Doing it because I'm good at it.
Makes a ton of sense.
At the whole time, you know, the meditation work that I've done, the therapy work that I've done, there's such a mechanism at this time in my life that is trying to find a way to fix what I don't like about myself. And so I'm on a rat race in a maze. You know, there's this constant movement of trying to find an open door that leads me to a different direction. And at that time, that's really what I was. I was a rat in a maze, trying to find the door of opportunity to fix what I didn't like about myself. But I was externally looking for something, right? It was money, it was fame, it was sponsorships, it was all of these things that were vanity. They were empty. They didn't provide me any kind of joy or solace or peace within myself that helped me ground myself emotionally.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. With that sense of competitiveness, I've seen this specifically in siblings. Did it ever become a problem between you and your brother? Good question, eh? I've seen this before. I'm just curious how, because I'm seeing you kind of like getting better, getting faster, and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, this was my sport. How did you guys do this together? And at what point?
It was tough. There was a lot of car rides home where there wasn't any speaking.
Ooh, yeah.
I started to get better than Brandon around 16, almost where I was 17, where he pretty much didn't stand a chance of beating me. And he would wreck me. He would crash me on purpose.
Yeah.
That's how much he didn't like to lose.
See?
He would rather wreck me and possibly hurt me than me beat him. And so, but that was that competition between me and Brandon existed since we were little kids.
I'll bet.
We didn't know how to lose. We hated losing to each other, whether it was basketball or soccer or base. We competed against each other for everything. And fights were, you know, me spraying an aerosol in his face or throwing screwdrivers at him. I mean, it was intense.
Yeah. Me
and my brother were very intense individuals, competitive wise. And I don't see that a lot these days, but my brother, it was, I will never let you beat me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does, it elevates you and him, and there's that breaking point. So it's a curious thing. I've heard that through siblings that are in the same kind of sports like that. It makes a lot of sense. So then at the time, and you were doing well, what made you decide to, you know, again, put it up against the wall and leave it there? Like, how did you walk away from it, and what happened?
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of it had to do with, one, not understanding the exceptional gift I had. In other words, there wasn't a big picture vision for what I was doing. There was no perspective surrounding, you know, you're really gifted on this bicycle. This is something that you work and you mine until the mine doesn't produce the product that you it doesn't produce any more product for you, right? I'm a rat in a maze at this time, and my answer to fix my problems is to make a lot of money. There's no money in BMX. It's a niche sport. It's like track and field. You know, unless you're Usain Bolt or Allison Felix, you make about $10,000 a year. In BMX, most of the people are making $10,000, $15,000 a year, maybe. A huge contract in BMX is $60,000. Now, to people listening, that still might be a great deal of money, but when you're talking about a professional athlete that literally is putting their life on the line in BMX racing, it's a very little amount of money, and it requires a lot of effort and training in your diet and sacrifice and discipline that a $60,000 job in the real work world would not require. And so for me, I was going to take this computer gift that I was developing as a network administrator, starting from when I was 13 years old on to being a senior in high school. And I was offered a job to be a network administrator for a guy who was developing these 802.11b wireless internet radios in 2002. He was going to put them on towers in these rich neighborhoods in Rancho Santa Fe, San Diego, California, a very exclusive area with a lot of money. And he was going to be one of the first people in the United States to provide wireless internet to individuals inside their homes using radio technology. And he hired me. It was a 6-figure deal. And at that point I was like, I don't need my bike.
Yeah.
My bike isn't going to provide six figures.
Nope.
It could, but I'd have to be one of the best. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really care about BMX racing like I cared about making money.
Making money.
I thought that the money was going to kind of alleviate the struggles that I was having. And right around that time is when the substances became a part of my life. Smoking marijuana first.
Yeah. So you didn't use until you were a little older. I mean, that's kind of rare, man. So when you opened that door and you were a little bit older, you think you could make your choices a little bit better. Did it get you fast? Did it catch you quick?
Yeah. I mean, if we were to do a timeline, I went from smoking weed one time, in my mind, to homeless in 5 years.
Man, yeah, that's a fast decline.
That's
a fast decline.
I've met very few people that can run the wheels off a car as quick as I can.
I mean, you're competitive, right? You got to get there first, and that's the same with losing your ground too, I would imagine. So it makes a lot of sense.
It works the same thing, you know. You put drugs in my hand, and I start selling them. I'm going to be the biggest drug dealer. You put drugs in a needle, and I'm going to try and outuse people. It's a very dangerous mechanism that I have a lot of gratitude when I think about times when I'm like, man, I don't know how I'm alive.
But that's the thing, though, and I tell people this, and at first when they hear this, they're like, "What?" But I'll be like, "You guys, you use the same tenacity and the same enthusiasm and the same kind of energy that you put into being a world-class drug addict, and you flip the script and do something positive. There's nothing you can't accomplish. You can create things out of nothing. You can do these things. You've already done them for the negative side. Flip the script, use the same principles, do them for something positive. There's nothing holding you back. And it takes a little bit of practice, but they get it. But you got so low that you ended up getting arrested. It sounds like there's a breaking and entering charge or something that finally caught up to you.
I wish it was breaking and entering.
That'd have been the easier route. Huh? What was it?
That's a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
I was actually convicted of an armed robbery.
It's a little more steep. You're right. You're right, Tony.
It was a home invasion. It was drug related. There was OxyContin inside the house. It went from smoking weed to cocaine and then prescription painkillers. Painkillers were the miracle for my addiction. And my addiction is self-hatred, resentment, depression, anxiety, and opioids alleviated me from those feelings temporarily. And by the time that I realized
takes the pain away.
Temporary, there was a physical addiction, there was a chemical addiction, and my behavior just spiraled out to where, I've experienced opioid withdrawals on several occasions, and I became willing to make the biggest mistake of my life. And that was to arm myself with a weapon and go inside somebody's home while they were there and rob them at gunpoint. And that was 3 years. We talk about 1 smoking weed, 5 to homeless. 1 to 3 was my armed robbery. 3, my third year into using. I was 21 years old, a young man. Didn't understand my emotions. Didn't necessarily understand the gravity of all my choices that I was making. The impact that those would have, not only for myself, right? That's easy. I lost my freedom.
Yeah.
But when you actually start to think about what it's done to that individual for the rest of their life, that's a whole nother level of understanding, right? And that's something that somebody that's selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking has a lot of trouble coming into touch with. And so at 21 years old, I make that decision. Knew I was going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Knew it.
You forecasted that before it even happened. So here's the deal then. How did you not lose your conscience all the way? How was there 1 grain of conscience left to put you on a redemption path? Because to me, I'm thinking that's kind of a crazy. I've worked with many people that have been in your situations, man. And a lot of them don't come out with this attitude of like, well, I'm going to create something better than when I went in. What was that one last granule of I don't know, self-respect that kept you from really sinking and going all the way?
After I did the robbery, I knew I would never do that again.
It wasn't you, was it? You're like, what is this? Like, this isn't me.
There was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that came with that. Heavier than I'd ever felt before. And for somebody that already hates themselves, that feeling was too much, right? I couldn't ignore it. And so I told myself, I can't ever do this again. And there's almost, obviously that's a good decision to make for myself, but there was also a mechanism that came with that also took more power from me.
Yeah.
Because now I believe that I'm worse than I am. I believe that I'm lower than I am. And so I stopped standing up for myself with society in ways with these people that I was around that would be taking advantage of me. Like I gave my power away and I would let these people speak who I am, speak what I'm worth, speak whatever it is about me. And I would take that on and say, this is me.
Right.
A lot of people listening right now, that was their mom and dad that they took those words from, and they said, okay, this is who I am. Yep. It was their best friend. It was the teacher, whoever it was. And so I said, I'm not going to do this ever again. And I held myself to that. But I didn't go to jail. I went to jail, but I didn't go to prison yet. There was 2 more years of, me trying to get it right or wanting to get sober, but not knowing how to get sober. And, my life got really dark. But before I was arrested on January 21st, 2007, I was convicted of my crime in May of 2005. Fast forward 2 years, January 21st, 2007, I have a spiritual awakening. That spiritual awakening brings me to a position where I no longer believe that I am in control of my life completely and that there is something else that's greater than myself that is sitting over me.
You felt it very profoundly.
I had an experience in church. I had a friend that called me and said I was going to get 3 significant chances and that God gave him this vision. If I didn't stop doing what I was doing before these chances took place, that I was going to go to prison. A year later, I was pulled over 3 times in 4 days. And then 2 months later, I was invited to a church randomly. And I went to this church, and this is all stuff that I would have said is total BS. It's all a sham.
Yeah.
It's for weak people. But for myself, I can tell you that it is 100% real.
Yeah.
I don't push that on people, but I will never deny the experience that I had in that church that day. And the pastor laid his hands on me during an altar call. I've been homeless. I'm wearing a Dickies jacket. I've got size 36 LRG jeans on. I was arrested at 138 pounds. I've got size 12 Shaq shoes on. I wear a size 9 shoe. These are all borrowed clothes or clothes that people have given me. I got blood stains all over my jacket. And this guy says, God has favored you your entire life and everything that you've done. And I just remember I started crying.
Whoa.
And he said, you don't have to worry anymore. God's going to remove you from your addiction. And I was January 21st, 2007. That night I broke into a house that was up for rent. And January 22nd, around 2 p.m., I was arrested by 4 cops that came into the house. A lady found me that was showing the house to some people, tried to wake me up, and I wouldn't wake up. And so she called the police and reported a drug overdose death in the house, and then needed to send the paramedics and the cops. And so the cops came, the paramedics came running in, and, they're trying to, put the stethoscope on me and take my vitals. And I'm like, I'm fine. And the guy was like, dude, the lady said you were dead.
Yeah.
We need to check your vitals.
Dang.
And that was it for me. Something about that moment gave me just a thread of hope. I was content with going to prison. I knew that I was going there, but I also felt like I was going there because I needed to be there. And where I was at in that moment is exactly where I was supposed to be. What I was supposed to do from that point forward was to rearm myself with a different type of thinking. And that thinking wasn't something that I could come up with. That thinking was something that would be given to me through the guidance of a spirit or the spoken word of the Bible, right? I don't think that people need to pick up the Bible to find this. There's many ways that people find sobriety, but there's somebody or some place that does the same thing that the Bible did for me, right? It's a therapist. It's a 12-step meeting. It's Celebrate Recovery. It's some kind of organization that's working with something. Hell, it could be working with animals. I don't know what it is. Everybody has a guiding light that leads them to their truth, right? Their understanding of who they are, why they're here, and how they're going to heal the hurts of their past. And so that spiritual awakening was really what gave me the thread of hope, but also gave me the light to walk on the path that I'm currently on.
Dude, powerful. You're talking about soul purpose. And when you discover that soul purpose, the reason you're on this little ball of mud, that really opens up your mind and your heart and your ability to do amazing things. And the funny thing about that is not a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about soul purpose, they hope they bump into it. And you've noticed that you are not living up to what God put you here for, obviously. And in fact, I think you can look back at it now and say it wasn't to be an NBA player or to be even the professional athlete on the BMX bike. It was for something else that you're discovering now, which is kind of amazing. And literally, you had to be taken all the way out, completely out of everything, to start making your way back in. And funny enough, you found that in prison, behind walls. Some people might say when you were captive, right? Well, you think about that. No, you've achieved what I like to call maximum security, right? We all want job security, financial security. You literally reached maximum security. No wants, no nothing. You were just there living, but you also found some freedom in there. Now tell me that paradigm shift, because again, you allow your mind to get trapped, and you're a competitive guy. I'm sure that you're like, man, there's got to be something here with that spiritual awakening, with that understanding now that God's got you in his crosshairs and he wants you to step up. What was it that kind of kept you like saying, hey, because I heard you made 3 promises to yourself in there. I think it was 3 promises that you were going to do. 4. It was 4. And I'm like, holy cow. It's funny because I've done that very thing, man. So when I heard you say that, I'm like, oh yeah. Tell the listeners a little bit about like you're putting your foot back into life instead of, taking a knee and dying.
I mean, first I had to recognize that while I was in prison and I should be there as a result of my consequences, I also shouldn't be there because I wasn't designed to be in a place where my freedom was taken from me. My effectiveness was greater than living in an 8x12 prison cell. The other thing was kind of understanding who I am as a person. I had to go on this journey of, examining who I am, what I'm good at, what I've enjoyed. Even as a young child, I had to remove my adulthood, right? I had to go back into my childhood and really identify with who I was then, before the world told me what I should make in terms of finances, before the teachers told me what I was ever going to be able to do. There was a young boy who just lived life the way he wanted to live life because that's what made him happy. And so once I got into that, I really realized like I'm an athlete. But I'm also a very empathetic person that carries a lot of compassion and wants to help people. I've always been a helper. And so once I kind of identified things like about my intense nature, it was like, okay, where can God use this? Yeah. Change other people's lives, to help other people. That was when it hit me. I need to get back on my bicycle. That's what I am. I'm an athlete. And I need to go to the Olympics. God's going to take me to the Olympics and put me on this stage where I can be a sounding board for what people can do with their lives when they're ready to change it, when they're ready to surrender and throw in the towel and give up all the old ideas and adopt new ones. And I'm going to start a nonprofit organization for kids. I truly believe the parable of the talent. Everybody's given a measure of talents, and it's our job to multiply that talents in our lifetime. That's our purpose, right? Yep. So my nonprofit is a way to multiply my talents that God gave me. And then I want to become a professional speaker. I want to tell my story and just help people. Everything that I was doing when I was in prison was completely opposite of what I'd done for 23 years of my life. For 23 years of my life, I tried to find ways that I could take, that I could earn, right? It was this. Jeez, man. Give me. The 4 things that I was doing and the meditation work behind what I was doing was how I can give to other people. Yeah. Certainly there's a component. I get paid to speak. I got paid to coach. My nonprofit paid me after 5 years. There was things, there is a receiving portion, but the intention behind it was merely to just help people. And so the beginning process was going through and understanding why I did things the way I did things for 23 years and how I need to do things for the rest of my life moving forward so I don't do the same things that I did before. And for me, it was pretty simple, dude. It was really pretty simple. Yeah. Whatever I did before, just do the complete opposite.
See? Works every time.
If I wanted to go, I knew that if I wanted to go left with the first 2 years of my life, I was acting on instinct that was probably improperly calibrated. Absolutely. So I would just go right. Yeah. That's why I didn't have a cell phone when I got out of prison for 13 months. That's why when I had Facebook, I didn't add anybody from my past for several years because in my mind, if I wanted to use a cell phone, I would use it for the wrong reasons. And if I added people from my past onto Facebook, it might be because I want to reestablish a connection with them that would cause me to relapse at some point. So I just didn't do it. I did the opposite.
It's incredible. That self-discipline is incredible.
People thought that I was selfish, but these were skills that I was learning to develop while I was away, right? I knew that I had 2 years to recalibrate my perspective about myself, about the world, and about my gifts.
Yep.
And as long as I could recalibrate those, when I re-entered in the world, I would be ready. And I think that's what God really wanted me to do was, I've used a metaphor that, my parents worked a lot. I was emotionally neglected, not intentionally, but as a young boy, I was like a boxer going into the ring, and I was getting the crap knocked out of me. And when the bell would ring, I would go back and sit into a corner by myself.
Yep.
I didn't have anybody coaching me. I get goosebumps every time I tell that because
it's true.
I really needed my dad in my life. I needed my dad to tell me how to jab, how to keep the distance from my opponent, how not to walk into uppercuts and, all of these things that really my dad could have done to help give me skills in life. And the only thing I got was was my ass kicked.
Yeah,
and,
you're right.
When I was sentenced to my time in prison, a lot of people would think, oh man, that's a terrible place to be. Sure it is. But I had time to think about, what was happening in the ring, why what was happening in the ring, and that my dad may not have showed up for me the way that I needed. And that's not his fault because my dad was doing everything to provide for me and my brother, so we had opportunities he didn't have. His intentions were 100% pure. My dad loves me, my brother, his wife, my mom. You know what I mean? But there are other sources of coaching available to us. There are other tools available to us that can show us how to show up for ourselves, or other individuals that can show up for us and give us those tools that we need. And so for me, prison was really just a recalibration camp.
Geez, listeners, I hope you're listening. You're being well fed. So, Tony, you're talking about some of this recalibrating and kind of taking a different look and a different approach. When you say that kind of stuff, I automatically kind of tune in because what you're talking about literally is repentance. So you look at the Bible dictionary. Repentance is taking a fresh view about yourself, about God, and about the situation. It's exactly what you were doing behind there. And I love the fact that even though you were, like literally storming someone's house, going into their area, that you were guns a-blazing, so to speak, that you knew that wasn't you. God knew that wasn't you. And you knew that like, crap, this is going to catch up. And it did. You didn't squander your time. You didn't waste your time. You turned the mess into a message, like we talk about, by erasing the addiction and replacing it with things of greater value. That doesn't mean that it was over. But it's like you had these thoughts of, I'm going to be a speaker. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to share some of the intimate parts of my life. It's going to be kind of embarrassing, maybe hard to talk about sometimes. I'm going to share the reality of it because you're doing things now that when I spoke about this 10 years ago, when I said, if we're going to be on Addict to Athlete, we're no longer anonymous. I think if you want to do that, that's fine, but that's not what this team's going to be. That's another program. And I'm fine with that. But us, anonymity in 2021 is deadly. And so you stepping out of that shadow to start talking about this stuff, I'm sure you caught flack just like I did at the beginning. It's like, wait a minute, you're talking about this kind of stuff? You felt the winds of change, didn't you? Like going from a place where people are like, you're going to say that out loud? Until now we were like, yeah. And what happens when you do? People from all over step up and they come to you and they're like, thank you for having the courage. Because of you, I'm going to go home and have a conversation with my dad or with my brother or with my son, whoever. So you literally moved again. That's why we did Addict to Athlete. It's no longer, hello, I'm Tony, I'm just an addict. Now it's, hello, I'm Tony, and I'm an addict. I'm a speaker. I'm an athlete. I'm a coach. Keep building on top of these things. Tell me about this road to the Olympics as you came out, because you made a promise. I want to go to the Olympics. But God had a different plan for you on even how that was going to turn out, didn't he?
He did. I got out on Saturday, December 13, 2008, went straight to the BMX track. And I went straight to the BMX. First stop. Well, Mimi's Cafe. I was picked up by a Hall of Fame BMXer, my mom, my dad, a good friend, and my brother. We went straight to the BMX track and we put that dream into motion. There was no delay. I truly believe that there couldn't be any type of delay, that I needed to put my money where my mouth is and I needed to do this.
How was it? Before you get into that, I'm curious. The first time you got back on, please tell me about that.
I was a kid, was what I felt at 25 when I got on a bicycle. I finally realized that those two wheels were more than wheels.
Oh, yeah.
I walked away from what God gave me at 18 years old, and I had no idea, you know. So the joy that I felt to be reestablished was something that I knew I had special, that I didn't ask for, was one of the best moments of my life. And, you know, I've never been asked that. You know, being able to recall that moment is very special to me. And it was very special for several years to be able to wake up and focus on training and riding in the rain and riding in the heat and all the things I got to do as a result of the gift that I was given. Unfortunately, after I made it to the Olympic level, I made 6 finals the first year as an elite pro, and I blew my knee out. When I blew my knee out, you know, I was really confronted with a lot of emotions, mainly, you know, kind of devastation and feeling like everything was not going to work out the way I thought it was going to work out. And that's extremely tough, especially for individuals that are early in recovery, right? We have this idea that when we decide to get sober, when we make a decision to clean up our lives and get a job or go to school, that everything is just going to go according to plan because we're on this path of fixing our life. But in reality, it doesn't really work that way.
It never does. Yeah, it never does. God had a different plan for you, man. Like,
He did.
You weren't supposed to go there as an athlete. Yeah.
No, and fortunately for myself, I was in a place. The washer's not too loud, is it?
No, you're fine. Yeah. Okay. Man, this is such great software. I can cut that stuff out anyway, brother. Just keep going. Don't even worry about it.
So I was devastated, man. I was like, this isn't supposed to happen. Like, I've put everything on the line. I have not missed any stones. I've had everything. I've worked so hard, harder than everybody else. I'd be willing to put my whole life on it. And the only thing I knew at that point was I had this thing called the micro process, basically brushing my teeth, making my bed, organizing my stuff, controlling the 3 feet in front of me. I can't control my feelings and how they work, but I can control how do I respond to the 3 feet that are in front of me.
Perfect.
And I just said, you know, keep brushing your teeth, keep making your bed and organizing your stuff. You know, I tried to come back to racing. It didn't work. I ended up developing ulcerative colitis. My back got hurt when I came back. It was just one wreck after another, basically.
Man.
And my nonprofit, though, I started my nonprofit 6 months after my knee surgery, and I started coaching BMX athletes for free at that time to try and establish myself as a BMX coach. And so from 2012, when my racing career basically was over for sure, up to 2016, there was a lot of stuff going on with my public speaking. You know, I spoke for free for 4 years because it wasn't about a career.
Right.
You know, people message me all the time. I want to do speaking for a living like you do. And I almost always am turned off by people that do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's never like, hey, how do you speak? I want to speak in front of people too.
Yeah.
It's always, I want to be a speaker for money and have a career like you do. And it's like, if that's the case, chances are you're never going to be a speaker.
Probably not going to make it. Yeah.
You're probably not going to make it because people aren't going to pay you in the beginning, and you're going to have to go out and find people to speak. And if they tell you no, you're going to have to tell them, I'm doing it. I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
And so I'm building my speaking career. I'm building my nonprofit, and I'm building my training. By the time 2016 hit, you know, I had 25 athletes from Australia to Bolivia.
Brilliant.
Coached 2 world champions, 3 national champions. I briefly coached 2016 gold medalist Connor Fields, almost helped him win a world championships. I talk about that in my book. Coached 3-time Olympian Emilio Falla. I didn't go coach him at the Olympics, but had coached him. Had some time with Donnie Robinson, Olympic bronze medalist from 2008, as his personal coach for several years. Ryan Martin, 5-time world champion. I mean, I've just been able to coach some very decorated athletes that I'm so fortunate that they gave me their life and their gift for the time that they did. And Brooke Crain, I went to the Olympics with Brooke Crain in 2016.
Rio.
Yeah, Rio. She's tying up her career this year. She just sent me a picture the other day of her final jersey, and it's got my name on it.
Oh man, yeah.
And we, her and I just have developed such a friendship and bond and relationship. She's had her own mental health struggles, many of them identity related.
For sure.
And her father committed suicide.
Oh man,
a year and a half ago, and so she's really just been somebody very close to me. And I as a coach, I never focused on results. No. I focused on character.
That's what it's about.
What does it take for us to win? And if we don't win on the track, what does it take? How do we use that character skill set to win in life?
Absolutely.
And, that's something that's more important to me than anything else, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. That's the thing, though, is that's what I wanted to touch base with you on, is because, I'm a therapist and drug counselor, all this stuff. But you know what? When we started this team and people started calling me coach, now that meant something, because that means that they were choosing to listen. They were choosing to kind of come and be part of something because they felt that me and you had something that they could benefit from. And it had nothing to do with techniques as I train these guys to run and do all these things. It's not about that. It's about the person that we are, the things that we've done, we've seen, that these guys say, hey, we can believe in that. To me, I'm thinking that's the most powerful label anyone can have, because that's more than a mentor. That's I think the gold standard when you get that label. But that's the thing, man. I want to know for you, because I think that this is, and I can feel it, man. I can feel your energy here. This is your sole purpose. This is what God was talking about. You needed the athleticism to put you in that arena, but you were more than that because you needed to be a coach. I've seen you speak to people. I've watched your videos. I see that the classrooms and the stadium and the arenas, they're not empty. People are coming to you because you're coaching them. You're coaching them on how to make better choices, how to avoid the pitfalls, but you're giving them still a choice. The choice is yours. I'm not telling you have to. It's not about the victory. It's about the game and getting through it. But I love that about some of the stuff I've listened to you in, is it's not like a do or die situation. It's a be cautious, know your opponent, know what you're doing. Be cautious. And I love that about what the spirit that you've got. How well do you, I don't know, which do you feel more accomplishment, being that athlete or now being looked upon as that coach?
Athlete's a pretty selfish thing, man.
Yeah.
I think that every athlete, if you sat them down in a padded room of vulnerability and they had the ability to get past their ego, they would probably tell you that competing is very empty. That winning doesn't provide what you think it does. Now, that's not a ticket to say you shouldn't reach for your potential.
Of course not.
But I think something that's been very eye-opening for me is there's an interview that everyone should probably go watch. Is Mike Tyson's getting interviewed at his house several years after his career as one of the most decorated and successful boxers in history. He's got all of his accomplishments laid out. And he's like, look at this, Michael. This is years of, championships and stuff. And he looks at him and he goes, it's garbage.
Yeah.
And he goes, what do you mean? And he goes, it means nothing. He goes, at one time it meant something, but in reality, it's nothing. It's emptiness, right? There's nothing.
Man.
There's nothing really on that table, and that's what being an athlete is for me. I think that I wanted to reach my potential as an athlete and be great as an athlete when I came back, because that's what I should be doing as a human being, is trying to reach my potential with the gifts God gave me.
Yep.
But there's nothing more rewarding than knowing that somebody else's success or somebody else's accomplishments, you have a part in that, and that they look to you for that accomplishment. For example, I started training this kid when he was 13 years old. His name's Austin Hyatt. Probably one of the hardest working athletes that I ever got to work with. He was from my local area, and our first tough training ride, it was in the pouring down rain, and pouring down rain. And he's a 14-year-old kid at this time, and he's crying. And he says, why are we doing this? I want to go back. And I said, just keep pushing. I said, we have to do this. I said, all of this is going to make sense at some point, I promise. It's going to pay off. And he never made it as an athlete. He was too small. He wasn't strong enough. But it didn't stop him from working hard. He was 155 pounds, I think, when he went into the fire academy. The smallest one in the fire academy by a lot. In California, I mean, I think less than a dozen people a year get hired in the California Fire Academy. And he graduated at the top of his class.
Wow.
Was the first person to get awarded a job. And he would check in with me, and he would be like, man, these guys, they're lazy. They can't buff their boots. They're not into ironing their clothes. They don't like making their bed. And he came over to my house, and this is one of the greatest moments of my life so far. And he said, I remember, being on that ride and crying. And he said, you told me that it would all make sense at some point. And he goes, had you not made me do that, I wouldn't have the job that I have today. He said, you gave me the skill to outwork everybody, even though I was smaller than them. And it created a job opportunity for me. And now how I'm going to build a family and buy my first home and stuff. And that was it,
Dang.
right? It wasn't about winning races. It was about winning the day. It was about using what you have in front of you and making the most of it. And that doesn't mean that we're going to hit the mark every day, because you just can't win them all.
Yeah.
But we can do good work when we don't want to do good work at all. And to me, that's the definition of discipline.
It is. It is. And I love the fact you brought that up, because I've got a story in my head, man, because I watched a video on you. And one of the reasons you quit playing ball was because your coach was like, grab a jump rope, and you're like, kick rocks, man.
Yeah.
And you said that very thing. You said, I didn't know then what he was trying to do back then with me. And if I would have listened to him, who knows what could have happened? It would be different. But you looked at it as, well, this is dumb. I'm not skipping rope. I'm not going to ballet if I'm going to be a football player. But I love the fact that even though you had to learn that lesson the hard way, man, you still use that same principle with that young man out there in the bike in the rain. Like, you figured it out.
Everybody, I try to, maybe sometimes a little overboard with my coaching mentality. I just, I just want people to have life skills to navigate life, to try and push themselves to become mentally tougher, to get uncomfortable, to do things that they don't like. Not all the time, but just to challenge yourself, to make yourself feel uncomfortable, so you are ready for when life throws you a curveball, that the pain that you're going to feel isn't so foreign, that you know what it's like to have to be resilient and to stand up and walk in the snow when you don't have shoes, knowing that if you walk far enough, you'll reach a destination where there's a pair of shoes that you can put on, and those shoes that you put on will sustain you for a good portion of your journey.
I believe you wholeheartedly, brother. This time, it always goes by so fast. There's so much more I need to pick your brain on, but maybe that'll be a part 2 somewhere in the future. But nonetheless, man, I'd love to know, how do people find you? You've got some books out there. I want to attach some of this stuff, but just kind of from the man himself, how do people follow you? How do they get involved? You've got a nonprofit for young people. We've got a young division of our Addict Athlete team. We call them the minor league. And the minor league in yours could probably connect sometime and do some real good. But tell the listeners a little bit about how to find you, social media outlets, web pages, all that fun stuff.
Sure. Find me on Instagram, Tony M. Hoffman. Ask me a question, leave a comment. I answer all my DMs. Tony Hoffman Speaking on Facebook. TonyHoffmanSpeaking.com is my website. One Choice is my podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcast app. It's been on hold. I'm actually in the process of building a house out here in Texas. I plan on reinitiating the podcast at the beginning of the year, but there's almost 100 episodes that you can get into. One series is the mental series. Another series is a lot of the crazy stories that I've been through, but also interviewing other people and getting insight into their childhoods and kind of the mechanisms that are the precursor to us trying to change the way that we feel through mind-altering substances. So, those are the ways to find me. I have a book coming out, From Prison to the Olympics, the Tony Hoffman story. I'm hoping to have that before the new year hits. So if you enjoyed the podcast, definitely connect with me on one of my social media outlets so you know when the book comes out. If you're an individual that has a loved one that's in prison or an institution, that's my goal, is to get them a copy of my book, because my book has the blueprint of mindset, how I ended up there, how I got to where I'm at right now. And I truly believe that it's going to be a book that gets into institutions and is one of those well-known books that every prison has floating around it, because the information in there is something that every inmate can use.
Yeah, that to me is awesome. We have a chapter of Addict to Athlete in our state prison. And I went out and ran a 5K with them once. It was the funniest 5K. It was like 30 loops around the inside of their track, and it was the best 5K I've ever ran because I was running with these people that felt absolutely free. So we'll get you some of those copies of the book Conquest. We'll get you some from Tony here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
pleasure.
for everything.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're
Your wife's
powerful,
amazing
man.
for reaching out.
That's her fault. She's over here. Yeah, that's her fault. She does all the cool stuff, behind the scenes stuff. But no, listeners, you've been well fed. Listen to this podcast. Send it out to those who are struggling. And again, Tony, he's not pulling your chain here. If you've got a loved one that struggles, or if you've got a loved one that's behind bars, or a teenager for that matter, who's going down that path, let him know, let us know, so we can kind of maybe help you turn that message into a message with them. I want to thank Radio Ronin for all that Radio Ronin does for Team Addict to Athlete. Go check out all the podcasts they have on the platform. And athletes, until next time, go turn that mess into a message.